We don't usually hear a story start with a sound like that. Paper tearing slowly, not in a rush, not angry, just deliberate. It stayed with us because nothing about it felt accidental. Katie Morales was not loud. She didn't make scenes. And what happened that morning only makes sense if you understand that everyone in the room knew it. This is where she takes over. I was standing in the hallway with my backpack open on the floor, double-checking the folder where I kept my acceptance letter and my notes. The house smelled like coffee and laundry detergent. Normal stuff. I remember thinking that if I forgot anything, it would probably be toothpaste. Victor stepped out of the kitchen and blocked the hallway. He didn't look upset. That was the part that caught me off guard. "You leaving already?" he asked. "I'm heading out soon," I told him. "My bus is later this afternoon." He glanced at the backpack, then at the folder in my hand. "You got everything?" "Yeah." He reached out and took the passport from my fingers. Not fast, not like he was grabbing something, like he was checking it. "Victor, give that back." He opened it, flipped to the photo, then closed it again. "You really thought this was happening." "I told you it was happening." He shook his head, almost smiling. "You don't get it. You don't just leave when we need you. That's not your call." He looked past me, toward the living room where our mom was folding towels. "You're not calling the cops," he said quietly. "You never make things public. You won't embarrass Mom and Dad." Then he bent the passport in half. The sound was slow, thick. He tore it clean down the middle and walked into the bathroom. "Victor, stop," I said, following him. He dropped the pieces into the toilet and pressed the handle. The water rose, spun, and took everything with it. "There's no trip," he said, turning back toward me. "You're staying. Lucas needs you." From the hallway. Mom didn't come closer. "Family comes first," she said. Like she was reminding someone of a rule we'd all agreed to. I stood there longer than I should have. Long enough to notice the little red light blinking on the security camera above the door frame. Long enough to realize he really believed this would work. I went to my room, zipped the backpack, and walked out the front door. We noticed something then. She didn't threaten. She didn't argue. She left. I didn't have a plan. I just knew I wasn't staying. I texted Tanya and wrote, "Can I come over?" I didn't wait for a reply before heading to the bus stop. If this story sounds familiar in ways you didn't expect, you're not alone. Sometimes the quiet exits matter the most. By the time I reached the bus stop, my hands were shaking. Not from the cold, from everything I didn't say back there. I sat on the bench, backpack on my lap, and tried to slow my breathing the way I used to before exams. In for 4. Out for 4. It worked a little. This hadn't started that morning. It never does. When I moved back home during my last year of college, it was supposed to be temporary. "Just until you're on your feet," Mom had said, sliding a plate toward me at the kitchen table. "Save some money." Back then, Lucas was still a baby. Victor would hand him to me while Elena ran errands or took a nap. "Just for an hour," he'd say. "You're home anyway." An hour turned into whole afternoons. Afternoons turned into weekends. Somewhere along the way, the question disappeared. "Can you watch him tonight?" "You're not doing anything." "Right. Elena's exhausted." "You get it." If I mentioned a paper due or an early class, Victor would wave it off. "You're good with kids." "This matters." Mom backed him up without even looking up from the sink. Family helps family. Dad stayed quiet. He always did. He worked long hours and came home tired, like exhaustion was an excuse not to notice patterns. Lucas's toys started showing up in my room. A baby monitor on my dresser. A diaper bag by the door that everyone treated like furniture. I missed birthdays. I skipped study groups. I canceled plans with friends and stopped explaining why. One night, after Victor dropped Lucas off without warning, I said, "I really can't tonight." He stared at me, surprised. "What do you mean you can't? I've got a final tomorrow." He sighed like I'd inconvenienced him on purpose. This is what being part of a family looks like. Katie. That was the line. The one that made everything sound final. We noticed how often that phrase showed up when no one wanted to hear her answer. Sitting at the bus stop now, I realized something I hadn't let myself think before. Helping had slowly turned into obligation, and obligation had turned into something else entirely. My phone buzzed. Tanya's name lit up the screen. "I'm on my way," she wrote. "Stay right there." I leaned back against the bench and closed my eyes. For the first time in a long while, no one was asking me for anything. The email came in while I was at the campus library, killing time between shifts. My phone buzzed, and I almost ignored it. Then I saw the subject line. I opened it slowly. Like if I rushed, it might disappear. "We're pleased to offer you a place." I read it twice, then a third time. 10 days in Taos, a writing residency, small group, quiet space, actual mentors. I pressed my thumb into the edge of the table to make sure I was really there. When I got home that night, I tried not to sound excited. I set my bag down, kicked off my shoes. I got into something, I said, standing by the kitchen counter. Victor glanced up from his phone. "Into what?" "A residency. In New Mexico. It's for writing. 10 days. He frowned, already doing math in his head. "When?" I told him the dates. He laughed once, short. "That's not going to work. It already did." I said. They accepted me. I paid the deposit. Mom looked over from the stove. How much was that? Everything I'd saved. Victor leaned back in his chair. "So what? You're just leaving us to figure it out." "I figured out my part," I told him. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. Elena didn't say anything. She stared at her plate, pushing food around like she was tired before the conversation even started. "This isn't a vacation," I added. "This could actually help me." Victor shook his head. "You're choosing writing over your nephew." We noticed how quickly it became a choice she was never offered before. I went to my room and closed the door. I sat on the bed with my laptop open, rereading the acceptance letter, tracing the dates with my finger. 10 days. That was it. Not forever. Just enough to breathe. I texted Tanya a screenshot. She replied right away. "This is huge," she wrote. "Don't let them shrink it." I stared at the screen for a long second before typing back. "I'm trying not to." I packed that night, slow and careful. Notebook, pens, printed drafts. I kept thinking the same thing over and over. For once, this wasn't about being needed. It was about going. Dinner started the way it usually did. Victor dropped his keys in the bowl by the door. Lucas ran circles around the table with a plastic truck, making engine noises. Mom set plates down without asking who was hungry. Dad came in last, loosened his work boots, and sat like his body hadn't caught up with him yet. I waited until everyone had taken a few bites. Not because I was nervous. Because timing mattered. "I need to go over my dates," I said, keeping my voice even. "I leave for Taos on Monday. I'll be back the following Thursday." Victor didn't look up right away. He chewed, swallowed, then glanced at Elena. "That's the same week we're trying to get a break." "I know," I told him. That's why I said something early. He set his fork down. "So you'll watch Lucas before you go, and then when you get back, we'll figure out the rest." "No," I said. It came out clean. No apology attached. The table went quiet. Lucas banged his truck against the chair leg. Mom reached for the salt, then stopped. Victor's mouth pulled tight. "What do you mean?" "No, I mean I'm not available," I answered. "I've already committed." Elena finally spoke, her voice low. "We're exhausted." "I get that," I said. "But I can't be the solution every time." Mom folded her arms. "You live here," she said. "You don't pay rent. You help." "I help," I said back. "I don't sign my life away." Victor leaned forward, palms flat on the table. "If something happens to Lucas while we're gone, that's not fair." I cut in. My hands were shaking under the table, but I kept going. You're turning this into something it isn't. He laughed once. Sharp. You're choosing writing over family. I'm choosing myself for 10 days. We noticed the way the room shifted then. No yelling. Just the weight settling in. Dad cleared his throat like he might say something. He didn't. Mom stood up and started stacking plates. Family comes first, she said, like it was a policy she'd memorized. If you live under this roof, you contribute. I nodded. Slow. I contribute every day. This is me saying there's a limit. Victor pushed his chair back. Don't expect us to cover for you. I'm not asking you to. He shook his head, already standing. Then, don't be surprised when things get complicated. After that, no one spoke much. Forks scraped. Lucas dropped his truck and started to cry. Elena scooped him up without looking at me. I carried my plate to the sink and rinsed it off. My hands steadied under the water. When I turned around, Victor was gone from the room. Later that night, my phone stayed quiet. No follow-up, no argument, just a silence that felt intentional. The next few days felt wrong in a way I couldn't explain. Not loud, not angry, just off. Victor didn't ask me to watch Lucas. Not once. No texts. No reminders. Elena avoided the kitchen when I was there. Mom spoke to me the way she talked to customer service on the phone. Polite, careful, finished as quickly as possible. At breakfast, Victor scrolled on his phone and said nothing. At night, he came home late. When he did pass me in the hallway, he didn't look up. That scared me more than the arguing. One afternoon, I reached for my charger on the counter and found it moved. Small things like that. My notebook wasn't where I left it. My laundry basket showed up outside my door. I asked Mom if something was wrong. She kept her eyes on the sink. Everyone's just tired. I'm tired too, I said. She nodded once, like she'd heard me, but not like it mattered. The house had a new rhythm. No noise, no friction, just distance. Even Lucas stayed close to Elena, quieter than usual, like he could feel it too. One night, Victor walked past my room and stopped. You packed yet? He asked. Almost. He stood there for a second, then nodded. Good. That was it. We noticed how silence can be used like a pause before something heavier. I lay awake later, staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the vents. I told myself this was better, that this was what boundaries looked like, but my chest stayed tight, like I was waiting for a door to slam. On the dresser, my passport sat in its pouch, right where I'd left it. I didn't know yet that he'd already decided what came next. Tanya's apartment smelled like burnt toast and lavender cleaner. She handed me a mug and waited until I sat down before saying anything. What happened? I told her. Not in order. Just pieces. The dinner. The silence. Victor tearing the passport like it was nothing. She didn't interrupt, just listened, arms crossed, jaw tight. That's not family drama, she said when I finished. That's a crime. I shook my head. It's complicated. It's only complicated because you live with them. I stared into the mug. The tea had gone cold. I don't want to blow this up. She leaned forward. Katie, he destroyed a federal document. On purpose. He counted on you staying quiet. That part landed. Counted on it. I pulled my phone out without really deciding to. Opened the security app my dad had installed after the porch thefts last winter. I'd had access because I was home the most. Because I was useful. I scrubbed back to that morning. There I was in the hallway. Victor stepping into frame. The way he took the passport. Calm. Almost bored. The tear. The flush. My chest tightened watching it from the outside. It looked worse than it felt. Or maybe clearer. We noticed how different things feel when there's proof and no one can interrupt it. Tanya sat next to me. Didn't touch my arm. Just stayed there. You can call the non-emergency line, she said. You don't have to decide everything tonight. I nodded, thumb hovering over the screen. Mom's voice echoed in my head. Family comes first. Don't make things public. I thought about the 10 days in Taos, the letter, the way Victor had said I wasn't calling anyone, like it was a fact. I made the call. The dispatcher's voice was calm. Asked for my name. The address. What happened? There's video. I told her. From inside the house. She paused, then said an officer would meet me there the next afternoon. After I hung up, Tanya exhaled. You okay staying here tonight? Yeah, I said. I think so. I didn't sleep much, but for the first time, the waiting felt different, like something had already shifted, even if no one else knew yet. The officer met us on the porch just after noon. He was younger than I expected, polite in that careful way people get when they know they're stepping into something personal. Tanya stayed by the car. I walked up the steps alone. Dad opened the door and froze when he saw the uniform. What's going on? He asked, already glancing past me like there had to be another explanation. I need to grab something, I said. Can we come in? Mom appeared behind him, her face tightening when she noticed the badge. Victor's voice came from the living room. What is this? The officer introduced himself and explained why he was there, asked if we could look at the security footage together. Dad nodded without speaking and stepped aside. Victor stood up slowly. This is ridiculous, he said. She's overreacting. I didn't answer. I opened the app and handed my phone to the officer. We watched it together. The hallway, me with the folder, Victor stepping in, the way he took the passport, not rushed, not angry. The tear, the flush. No one spoke while it played. When the sound of the toilet filled the room, Mom sat down hard on the couch. Dad rubbed his face with both hands. Victor laughed once. Then, you can't be serious. It was a joke. I didn't think the officer looked up from the screen. Do you deny that this is you destroying your sister's passport? Victor hesitated. I didn't realize it was that serious. It's a government document, the officer said. Intentional destruction is a crime. A report will be filed. We noticed how fast the room changed once the word report was said out loud. Dad's voice came out rough. You did this. Victor turned to him. She forced it. She could have just stayed. That wasn't your decision, Dad said. He didn't raise his voice. That was worse. The officer gave me a card with a case number and instructions for replacing the passport. He asked if I had somewhere safe to stay. I nodded. After he left, the house felt smaller. No one moved. Dad cleared his throat. We're not doing this here, he said. Get your coat. We're going to talk somewhere public. Victor scoffed. You're taking her side. Dad looked at him then. Really looked. I'm taking the truth. I grabbed my bag. As we headed for the door, Mom reached for my arm, then stopped herself. The silence followed us out to the car. We ended up at a diner off the highway, one of those places with cracked vinyl booths and coffee that tasted burnt no matter how much cream you added. Dad chose it because no one there knew us. Victor slid into the booth across from me, arms crossed. Mom sat beside him, quiet. Dad stayed standing for a moment, then sat down slowly, like he needed to feel the weight of it first. I watched that video 3 times. Dad said, I want to hear you explain it. Victor shrugged. I was stressed. We needed help. She was acting like she could just leave. That's not an explanation, Dad said. That's an excuse. Mom stared at the table. We've all been under pressure. Dad turned to her. Pressure doesn't give anyone the right to decide someone else's life. Victor leaned forward. She lives in your house. She doesn't pay rent. She owes this family. I felt my chest tighten, but Dad spoke before I could. We've been sending you $1,800 a month, he said, for childcare, for the house. That stops today. Victor blinked. You can't do that. We already did, Dad said. That money was never meant to trap her. We noticed how quiet the booth got once the numbers were out in the open. Mom finally looked up. "So what happens now?" Dad turned to me. "You'll need help getting out. We'll cover the passport replacement. First month somewhere else. That's it. This isn't a reward. It's a reset." Victor laughed, sharp and tired. "You're choosing her." Dad shook his head. "I'm choosing what should have been obvious." The waitress came by and refilled the coffee without asking. No one touched it. When we stood to leave, Victor stayed seated. He didn't look at me. Outside, the air felt cooler, lighter. Dad unlocked the car and paused. "I should have stepped in sooner," he said. I nodded. It was the first time that felt like enough. The fallout didn't come all at once. It stretched out over weeks, slow and uneven. Victor stopped calling. When he did text, it was short. Logistics. Lucas pickup times that never included me. Elena sent one message, late at night. "I'm tired." I didn't know how to stop it. I read it and didn't answer. Not because I was angry, because I didn't know what answering would fix. I moved into a studio near the train line. Small place, thin walls, a window that looked out over a parking lot and one stubborn tree. The first night, I sat on the floor with my back against the bed frame and listened to nothing. No cartoons, no door slamming, no one needing anything. Dad helped with the passport replacement and the first month's rent. He didn't hover. He didn't apologize again. That mattered. The writing residency reached out and offered me the next session. Same place, same length. I accepted without telling anyone right away. I wanted it to be quiet. I saw Lucas once, at a park near my place. Victor dropped him off and stayed in the car. Lucas ran toward me, arms out, shouting my name like nothing had changed. We sat on a bench and shared crackers. He showed me a rock he'd found and said it was special. I told him it was. When Victor picked him up, he stood there longer than necessary. "You didn't have to do all this," he said. "I did." I answered. My voice didn't shake. He nodded once, like he didn't agree but understood the cost of pushing back. Later, on the bus ride home, I took my notebook out and wrote my name at the top of the page. Katie Morales. It felt different than it used to, like I was signing something I intended to keep. I don't think everything is fixed. I don't think it ever will be. But the space I have now feels earned. I decide where my time goes. I decide when I show up. That's new. We stayed with her through the quiet parts because that's where the change settled. If this story felt familiar, it might be worth sitting with the moment she chose not to go back.